In a remarkable shift, the Indian government's strategic transition from being a net importer to a net exporter has propelled the country's defence sector to new heights. The Ministry of Defence marked a historic year in 2023, witnessing a surge in defence exports, reaching an unprecedented 16,000 crores in the financial year, almost 3,000 crores more than the preceding year, and defence production also scaled to new heights. All eyes will be on the budget to get some more dope on what the industry and the sector expects. We have with us three very, very interesting and impressive individuals joining us on the show. Ashok Atluri, CMD of Zen Technologies, Arun Ramchandani, Executive VP and Head Defence, and Amit Mahajan, Director of Paras Defence. Thank you, gentlemen. You're all three, in a way, are industry representatives and also represent defence and know the sector better than any of us do. My first question, and Ashok, I'll start with you. With heightened tension in the Middle East and on the heels of the Russia-Ukraine war last year, will the current geopolitical setup have any weightage or impact on the nation's budget for defence as we head into budget 2024?
So I think it's going to seriously impact. I mean to say that, two things that came out very well out of this whole, fiasco in Ukraine or in Middle East. The most impenetrable country where ragtag soldiers on hand gliders could take over the country for 6 hours. The thing would be, the lack of preparedness. And the first is that they were not prepared well. They did not work out all the scenarios, and they almost, the Iron Dome, etc., went for a 6-hour. So the preparedness is one thing that will come out. Combat readiness will come out very well as a hype thing, this budget. And the second is a complete lack of defense against the drones. A solid defense against drones is another thing that will really come up in this budget. So these two things are are major factors that are going to determine the next course of action for many countries: combat readiness and protection against the emerging drone threats. So yes, to your question, these things will the wars will absolutely impact the budget, and there will be some focus areas. Especially, and we have seen in Ukraine, they have the world's most advanced equipment gifted, but they don't know how to operate. If that could have been easily ameliorated by using simulators and other training equipment, but they could not, and they are not. They're in a pretty bad position. Over to you, Samina.
Hi. Amit, what do you think? Do you think the capital outlay momentum will continue this year as well? And what sort of expectations do you have in terms of an increase in those budgets?
So, taking over the first question as well, if you see whatever has been happening across the geopolitical scenes across in the world, what we see is there is more impetus we need to put on Atmanirbharta. Because we cannot, on the technological front, we cannot depend on anybody else but our own selves. Our preparedness, like rightly said by Atluri sir, we need to be self-reliant when it comes to our military preparedness. And I think capital outlay increase is inevitable because this is the only way we can generate a lot of momentum in domestic production and be ourselves self-ready for an eventuality like this.
So preparedness, I think that's the key takeaway I'm taking from both of you, Mr. Atluri and Mr. Mahajan. So Ramchandani, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, there's so much happening in the background. Last year, of course, was Russia, Ukraine. This year, there's the Middle East. And this is only going to worsen. Of course, the Red Sea, we can't forget. It's only going to get worse, if not tougher, as we go along, unfortunately. Keeping that as a backdrop, do you think the onus, the impetus on defense as part of the government's budget is only going to increase?
So the government's thrust on defense is very clear, and over the years we've seen growth in the budget. Of course, if you compare with the defense budget as a percentage of GDP, we are hovering around 1.8 to 2% of the GDP. And probably a country like India would, argue that that is all that we can afford. Year on year, we've been seeing growth of the budget to the tune of about 10%. I heard the Defense Secretary a few days back talking about a potential growth in defense budget of about 7.5%. And really, from the industry perspective, it's the capital budget which is relevant, and the ratio of the capital budget to the overall defense spend. My sense is that in the last few years, we've seen a trend of about 10% year-on-year increase on the capital budget. And I suspect that will continue. Notwithstanding the external environment, we have to also look at how things are internally. And my guess is that given the impetus on the various programs and acquisitions and the enlargements that all the three services have, given for themselves, I would expect that true to form about a 10% increase on capital outlay with respect to the last year is something that we can expect. I'm not sure if the current geopolitical pressures will drive it beyond that. And I'm also not sure that being an election year and, given our internal constraints, whether we may push that down slightly by a couple of percentage points. But on trend, capital growth 10% year on year, about 2% of GDP, 1.8 to 2% of GDP seems to be the norm which we follow, and I would expect that to continue.
Thank you, Mr. Ramchandani, for quantifying that. Mr. Atluri, you want to help me quantify that? Do you think getting closer to 3% is likely in this budget, or that's being very, very ambitious at this stage?
I think more than that, Samina, there should be some areas of focus, especially, given the fact that we are supposed to be defensive. For example, the anti-drone systems, we have a PLI scheme for drones, but anti-drones are not included, and drones also 120 crore PLI budget. Can they increase it to 1,000 crores and include anti-drone systems also? Again, IDDM kind of anti-drones only. So second is increase in the budget for IDDM category items. So that will directly impact companies like, Paras, Zen and all that, which are doing IDDM work, L&T. All of us are doing this work in indigenously designing and developing. The budget increase for them. So, overall, if these things are taken care of and, the impetus to the exports that is being given, they should allocate some kind of a large amount of funds so that Indian global champions in certain product categories can be pushed by the government, and we can go along. Even the defense attaches should be given some KPIs to promote the products. And, for example, one of the things that is being talked about is, combat training centers, which are becoming so important post this, sudden increases in war. They become so important. Can government tie up with other people and, increase the export income for the Indian industry? So this, I would say at a micro level, even these small things are allocated well. And even if the budget is, increased not to 3%, but maybe even less, then still we may call it a great budget.
Right, that was actually summing it up really well for me, Mr. Atluri, and I'll come to you, Mr. Mahajan, on that one. One thing that the government, and of course Mr. Atluri has also highlighted very clearly, is saying the IDDM category that needs to be focused on. Now that category, that list has been coming out for the last 4 to 5 years. Can we expect more of the items being added to that list, and what are those other items or products that should be making their way to that list?
So the good part is if you see the positive indigenization list, as we call it as PIL, and there are 5 lists that we have seen so far. What we can see across these 5 lists is an extremely aggressive and extremely hopeful government. They are so being faithful with the Indian industry that they have included from components to complete platforms. So certain platforms which are not even currently being indigenized or developed in India, they are hopeful and they are giving those incentives to the Indian industry, saying that why don't you try and attempt these technologies as well. So when we are looking at these 5 lists by themselves have generated huge amount of domestic opportunity. Said that there are certain technologies which are like, say, anti-drone technologies or drone technologies. The manufacturing of components required for the drone, manufacturing of components which actually build the anti-drone technologies. Now, these are the components which are the heart of any particular bigger system. And if these are being manufactured here in India, I think then that is the real essence of self-reliance in defense technologies. Now, what I would want it to be coupled with is maybe something like a PIL in defense. So if you have a PLI scheme in defense, production-linked incentives in defense, because these kind of PIL 5 lists that we have seen, they have already generated huge amount of long-term opportunities, which will in turn give a lot of production scope for the domestic industry. And if you are production ready in defense technologies, I think you are also world ready when it comes to defense technologies. So we should incentivize productionization of defense technologies by giving some incentives. This is what I would want to do.
Indeed, incentivize to, of course, make Indian defense companies, players in the global defense sector. So, Ramchandani, what are your thoughts? What would you like to see in that sense? Of course, Mr. Atluri and Sintarajan both indicated, we have to give an impetus. You have to incentivize. What category, what products, in your opinion, should the government push and incentivize at this stage? And what can we actually realistically expect? I mean, one thing is a list, but the other thing is having that list fulfilled.
So I would say there are a couple of things that the government needs to push. One from a financial or fiscal perspective would be the incentivization or the funding of domestic R&D. I think that is a critical part of the ecosystem. It's one thing to talk about incentivizing A product or B product. My sense would be that the thrust is on building indigenous capability, and indigenous capability is a complete ecosystem. It starts from large platforms, it goes down to subsystems, it goes down to components. And therefore, there are different, tiers of industry which are involved. There could be the small-scale industry, the MSMEs, the larger platform players. And broadly, what is required is access to R&D money, because defense R&D obviously doesn't have that kind of high-speed payback. It takes time. A lot of it is very niche research. And the incentivizing of domestic R&D, I would say, is one thing. For the MSMEs, the access to capital would be the second thing that I would say. And thirdly, what is really required is the speed of the procurement process. While number of large platforms have been ordered, many of these have been given to the public sector, etc. And the speed of inducting the private industry in through faster release of orders, the cycle time between, taking an acceptance of necessity to signing a contract. We really need to see shrinking of all of this to enable the industry to gather momentum.
Right. We'll talk about, specific action or changes that we're expecting to see in this budget. But we'll take a break. We'll come back in a few minutes. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching a pre-budget special where we're in conversation with the defense industry stalwarts on the show. Thanks, gentlemen. Thanks for standing by. Saturi, I'll come to you with this one. It's all been about export and the trust on export. And of course, we've made headline exports this year, of course, turning from a net importer to a net exporter for the defense sector. How and what actions do you expect the government to announce or the ministry to announce in this budget to accelerate defense exports? How do you think, or what would you like them to do to identify products, companies for that encouragement or incentives?
I think first we should, see companies that have really products that can easily sell in the export market. And that would be, for example, companies that they have already exporting, they have patents, global patents for them. They are global champions in a way. Government should actually try to identify these few pockets in the defense industry and then aggressively promote it, because they know that they have world-class products, and whichever friendly countries get them, they will be very, very happy with the products. So, and if we can focus on this, again, 80-20 kind of a Pareto kind of situation, that you don't try to focus across all the domains that you have, but only in few 20% of the products or 15% of the products that will give you, that are absolutely world class and will give a lot of export edge in the global market. So I think, and government should, of course, the DAs should be tasked with that thing as a KPI, that how much have you sold, how much of the products have been sold, how much of the products have been included in their budgets, what are the specifications, RFPs convenient to the industry. If all this is laid out, along with government to government visits where industry goes along with them, and they are specifically tasked, these global champions are tasked to present the products and get the orders, I think that will go in a big way. Again, not very inch deep and mile wide, but few products or segments, just to focus on them and say go to the global friendly countries and say these are the best products in the world, buy it from us, almost stand as a guarantee for those companies, because those products are already being used by India, and Indian Armed Forces can certify that these products are absolutely world class. And typically the Indian trial process is the toughest in the world. I mean, you go to Thar Desert, you go to Srinagar, then you go to Northeast with humidity, then you go to South. It's very, very difficult. Any product that works in all these places are actually very, very easy to sell anywhere else in the world. So I think yes, export should be a focus. And, thanks to the by the way, there is a sea change in the support that we are getting already. From 10 years back to now, we can see a lot of changes happening. And then the government standing also is very Indian today. Indian government is looked at respectfully by others. So you should leverage this standing that we have by offering great different products to our partner countries.
Right. So imagine you want to come in another space, emerging defense technology. They've talked about new technology in air defense, drones, so much in terms of new developments, right? And I've also heard the Defense Ministry talk about how they would like the private sector to take lead in this space. Now, what would you as an industry representative, somebody who does this day in and day out for a living, would like the government to do for you or announce to encourage your investments in this space?
I think taking a cue from what Arun sir said some time back, that if we incentivize the development portion in the defense, I think last budget also slotted some 25% of the DRDO budget for the industry to develop. I think this is where the wind is going to go, where more and more developments would come to the industry with a hope that it gets developed, one, in a much faster pace, and secondly, with a clear intent of it being commercialized. So what these two will create the necessary torque that is required for a development to happen. With this, what happens is the industry has its to its force, one, the hand-holding of DRDO, and second, access to the academia, which these, along with the industry, form the three dimensions of the development. And when this comes into action, I think more and more technologies, more and more critical technologies will start getting developed here. Now, once you start developing these technologies, I think your exports or your even, cutting edge technology readiness will all be taken care of.
So Ramchandani, you alluded to this. You said we need to build a whole ecosystem around this, and it's not going to be one budget or one government or 1 year. This is more of a long-term plan for India, and we got to be able to defend ourselves at the bottom of it. But let's take baby steps and talk about small steps that you're expecting in order to build this ecosystem. I think the steps are in the right direction from this budget particularly. I mean, it's all about, looking inward, supporting ourselves, and we've done a pretty good job so far. But if you can quantify or list out specific areas that you think that needs to be done to get that going or to encourage that as we go into a new year.
Okay, so again, looking at from a budget perspective, Mahajan talked about the announcement of 25% of R&D budget going down to industry, academia, and startups. Now, we need to have a mechanism in place for this to happen. I understand that the government is working on a suitable mechanism, but implementing a mechanism that would allow, today DRDO budgets are of the tune of 20,000 odd crores. And how much of this money could flow down into the industry? What is the mechanism that money getting channeled to the right R&D, to the people who have the infrastructure and capability to do that research? All of this is things which have to be worked out and implemented so that action starts on the ground. More funds are spent on development, newer products are inducted, tried out, tested. So I would say this is one of the things. Coming to exports, the government has done a lot, and the results are there to see. But let's look at the target which the government set for itself. We kind of hit $2 billion of export last year, and we've targeted 5 billion by 25. And all of this really means a huge acceleration of the quantum of exports. So we need to be able to export now larger platforms, etc. And unless that happens, 2 billion is not going to become 5 billion. If you're not exporting goods, programs where you got a $1 billion order or 750 million order, you need scale of the programs as well. And how we are going to thrust those kind of bigger exports. We did see some success with the BrahMos, and there are other platforms that the government is trying to push, whether they are naval platforms or the LCA and so on. And we really need to see how this can happen to give that level of quantum jump. The other thing in terms of, incentivization and making us more competitive, of course, I do believe that our industry with its, in-house developed products is certainly very, very competitive. But, typical like duty drawback benefits for exporters, the road tax scheme, which is being talked about now, defense gets 0% on road tax. There could be a couple of percentage points which are justifiably should be available for the defense industry. So these are some of the smaller things which can be done, which can enable the exports to happen. And of course, the biggest challenge on our competitiveness is our cost of capital, and whatever can be done to ease that. The other aspect is that a lot of the buyers are smaller countries that look for credit line funding. And I would say that an export credit fund, if can be created, we rely on the Exim Bank to deliver on lines of credit to some of the countries. And Exim Bank processes are probably a little complex, meant for more generic exports. And for defense exports, a dedicated export credit fund, which would speedily, end of the day, we are competing in an international market. And when the buyer is looking for credit, if we can speedily work out the credit, give attractive credit terms, it would definitely boost our exports, because that's what the other countries are doing. So we need to put all these mechanisms in place. And this will, we are in the right direction. We need to build more momentum, is all that I'm saying.
Thank you very, very much, gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to have all three of you on this panel and have this chat. Thank you so much, and we'll hopefully see all of you soon.
Our pleasure.
With that, it's a wrap on this pre-budget edition as we chat with the industry stalwarts for the defense sector and their demands and their wish list. Thank you.